The current Mount Hua has lost its former glory, but back in the day, it shone brighter than your favorite nightclub. Your old man lived with his head held high as a Mount Hua disciple. Gulp, gulp. Dressed in Mount Hua's uniform, Chung Myung was downing alcohol like it was water. Kwaa! Man, nothing hits like booze. Mount Hua is prestigious. That status wasn't handed out like participation trophies. It took the blood and sweat of countless badasses over generations to make it what it was. Some meat for me. Toss it here. Please, Sayang. There's no more left, idiot. You already stuffed your face. Stop trying to jack everyone else's food. I swear, if you reach for my plate, you'll pull back a bloody stump. Damn, you're selfish. Even though Mount Hua's on the struggle bus right now, it's going to make a comeback, bigger and better than ever. So don't just focus on the present. Keep your eyes on the future. If you protect Mount Hua, one day, Mount Hua will protect Huayong Gate, and together we'll rise. Kya, coming down from Mount Hua feels like I've been reborn. Sasuke is still here. Watch your mouth, you little punk. It's cool. I'm sure Sasuke's thinking the same thing I am. Nah, kid, I'm pretty sure staying with you is slowly killing me. Ha! You're a riot? I wish I was joking. Wei Lishan watched the Mount Hua disciples gulp down alcohol and devour meat while talking trash to each other, a pleasant smile barely holding together. I wish my dad could see this mess. If he could ask his father, he'd say, prestige? Resurrection? Look at this. Mount Hua is doomed, Dad. And not in a small way, like a spectacular train wreck. Tak! Wei Lishan pressed down on his stomach, trying to suppress the gnawing pain that had been messing with him for a while. But somehow, watching this chaos made his stomach ache even worse. Ugh. Unable to take it anymore, Wei Lishan cleared his throat, immediately drawing the attention of Mount Hua's wild disciples. Ah! Chung Myung sighed and waved a bottle of alcohol toward Wei Lishan. Want a hit? He's recovering. Didn't he have some internal injuries, genius? Think before you open your mouth, moron. You guys are hopeless. And just like that, it got rowdy again. Meanwhile, Wei Lishan's stomach pain shot up, doubling in intensity. First the name goes, then the pride. When he visited Mount Hua 10 years ago with his kid, Wei Sohang, cradled in his arms, he could still sense the pride, even though the place was falling apart. Now? Mount Hua's disciples were out here acting like a bunch of frat boys. What the hell happened in the past decade? Before Wei Lishan could say anything, Yeom Pyong, standing next to him, spoke up. Excuse me. Yes? Do you get what kind of mess we're dealing with? Baek Chun stood up, bowed slightly and replied, sorry. They're a bit free-spirited. Wei Lishan sighed. I'm not blaming you. Thanks to you guys, we bought ourselves a little more time. But Baek Chun, it's decision time. Decision? It's hard to pack up and leave the place I love, but what choice do I have? Huayong Gate will abandon Nanyang and retreat. Please, head back to Mount Hua. Gate leader. Baek Chun looked conflicted. I know things got a little out of hand. That's not it. If it were anyone else, we could hold out. But Wudang? You don't know what it means to cross the Wudang sect. If they've sent their disciples, they're dead serious about taking over Nanyang. Even if you win this round, they'll just come back harder. Chung Myung poured himself another shot and downed it with a smack. Quack. Then he turned to Wei Lishan. I was going to ask you about that anyway. Yes? What's so damn special about this place? They're coming at you like they're trying to claim beachfront property. The Wudang Chung Myung remembered wasn't like this at all. Wudang was all about dignity and inner peace, not this aggressive power grab. They used to chant sutras till their throats went dry. Of course, Chung Myung had been dead a long time, but the core values of a sect didn't change overnight. Would Wudang really go full throttle just to expand their turf in Nanyang? Something's fishy. Wei Lishan responded. Special? Hell no. If there was something special here, people wouldn't have left Nanyang alone all this time. Figured as much. He didn't get the answer he wanted, but Chung Myung wasn't mad. If Wei Lishan had known anything, the rest of the world would have known by now. Which meant, if they're hiding something, I'll just beat it out of the Wudang idiots. Wei Lishan sighed. Once the sun comes up tomorrow, I suggest you guys head back to Mount Hua. I'll handle the rest. What? No way. No way. Yeah, sect leader told us to fix Huayong Gate's problem. If we bail now, the sect leader will be so pissed he won't even look at us for 3 months. Damn, I can't even picture that. I feel you, Sayong. Yunjong and Jogul shuddered, not wanting to imagine such a fate. This isn't a joke. We're not joking either. Wei Lishan was about to lose his temper when Chung Myung cut in, his voice suddenly serious. Mount Hua hasn't forgotten what Huayong Gate has done for us. Wei Lishan's eyes trembled. Chung Myung's tone had completely shifted, and Wei Lishan could feel the weight behind his words. Now, it's time for Mount Hua to return the favor. Mount Hua doesn't turn its back on its ideals. The world will know that soon enough. Without thinking, Wei Lishan nodded, swept up by Chung Myung's intensity. Chung Myung, the divine dragon of Mount Hua. Wei Lishan suddenly realized he'd misjudged this guy earlier. But before we get into all that, yes? I have one request, Gate Leader. Say it. I'll do my best to get whatever you need. Then, Chung Myung shook the nearly empty bottle of alcohol in his hand. If there's any booze left at Huayong Gate, can you hook me up with a bottle? No, make it 3. You don't have any? Okay, maybe Wei Lishan hadn't misjudged him after all. All the preparations are done, disciple Jin Hyun? Jin Hyun nodded his head. You worked hard. Just one more day, and this damned work will finally be over. It's been tough. This role doesn't fit my character. Jin Hyun smiled. We are all fully aware of how hard you've worked. When this work is done, the sect leader will surely show you favor back in the main sect. Oh, don't say that. How could I dare hope for that? If there's some help for the training hall, that's all I could hope for. Jin Hyun smiled and nodded. It didn't matter if his words were sincere or not. This training hall leader wasn't important at all. Even if he refused, the Wudang sect would still reward him, and that would be the end of his role. By now, Mount Hua has to be trembling. Well, they were quite proud yesterday. Wasn't that just a bluff? Can Mount Hua even put up a fight against Wudang? I bet there isn't even a single ant remaining within Huayong Gate. Isn't that why disciple Jin Hyun gave them a day's time? Jin Hyun smiled softly and didn't respond. You must be exhausted from the long journey. I shouldn't waste your time here. No. Have a good rest. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Jin Hyun sighed as the training hall leader left. Sahyung. Jin Hyun's Sajae, Jin Mu, called him. Did Sahyung expect Mount Hua to come? I didn't, but the sect leader mentioned the possibility. It's difficult to follow the sect leader's insight. He's a man that stands so far above that when he looks down, he sees the heavens. Right. Jin Hyun quietly nodded his head. What do you think, Sahyung? As the hall leader said, do you think that Huayong Gate could run away tonight? Huayong Gate can, Jin Hyun continued calmly. But the disciples of Mount Hua cannot. Why not? Because they recently gained fame. Ah. Jin Hyun smiled. Normally, people don't grow overly attached to a reputation that has been rightfully built. But when they get more fame than they deserve, they tend to become obsessed with it. Perhaps Mount Hua's divine dragon will be unable to let go. If he runs away after such light provocation, he'll become the laughingstock of the whole world. But won't his reputation suffer anyway if he stays and gets defeated? Jin Hyun's eyes narrowed. Are you saying that losing to me would be a shame to him? I didn't mean that, Sahyung. Jin Hyun smiled and patted Jin Mu on the back. I'm just joking. Why wouldn't they wait? Losing is less shameful than running away. It would be good for them to learn some shame. They don't seem to understand the concept. Huh, that is true. Jin Hyun smiled as Chung Myung's face surfaced in his mind. That cheeky bastard. Jin Hyun understood. Having gained such a reputation at a young age, he must not put others in his sights. There was a time when Jin Hyun also shrugged his shoulders and arrogantly overlooked others because of his fame. Wasn't it the role of the elders to cull that behavior? If they don't know, all we need to do is let them understand. Of course. But, Jin Hyun spoke with a firm expression. We shouldn't focus too much attention on that. You haven't forgotten our true purpose in coming here, right? Yes, Sahyung. I haven't forgotten for even a single moment. Something that even the other Sajes didn't know. Only Jin Hyun and Jin Mu knew about it. The reason the two of them knew was to prepare for an unforeseen situation. Otherwise, it was something that Jin Mu shouldn't have known. Huayong Gate and Mount Hua are fine. What's most important is to draw people's attention away from Nanyang. If this goes well, we will be able to rise above the Shaolin sect and stand at the peak of the world. I'll keep that in mind. Jin turned to look out the window, the moon floating high above and the stars that shone in the sky reflected in his eyes. Sword Tomb, the tomb of a sword. That was why they created a fake subsect and came all this way out here. First, we drive those Mount Hua bastards out of Nanyang, and then we'll slowly proceed with the plan. Yes, Sayung? A low smile formed on Jinhyun's lips. Soon the world will be under the Wudang sect's feet. It was a night of deep conspiracy. Wei Lishan, who hadn't slept all night, stared at the sky, his eyes as bloodshot as if he'd spent the night at a bar binge-watching Netflix. The sun was already high up, doing its thing. This is insane, he thought. Yesterday, Wei Lishan found himself swept up in the chaos caused by Chung Myung's gang. It should have been impossible for a guy his age to get caught up in the rhythm of some kids as young as his son, but these weren't your average teens pulling pranks. They were legit troublemakers. In the end, Chung Myung passed out after raiding Hwayong Gate's warehouse and downing all their liquor. And the freakiest part? His crew didn't even try to stop him. They were probably like, yeah, that's just Chung Myung being Chung Myung. Is this really okay? Wei Lishan rubbed his temples. Mount Hua's disciples had gone wild yesterday. They threw insults at the Wudang disciples that even a sailor would have blushed at. If things get spicy, Mount Hua's disciples might be in real danger. And let's face it, Wei Lishan himself wouldn't come out unscathed if things went south. But then, he opened the window. Outside, the Mount Hua disciples were lounging in the morning sun like they were on vacation. Yawn! Joe Gul yawned, looking like he just rolled out of bed. His eyes drooped as he glanced at Yoon Jong. When are they showing up? They said today, didn't they? Yeah, but the sun's already up. They said around the same time as yesterday. Chill. If you're bored, go back to sleep. I made a habit of waking up early, and now I can't go back to bed. Dude, that's sad. Even if Joe Gul didn't realize it, his body had been molded by Chung Myung's crazy training schedule. The tragic reality was that Yoon Jong was in the same boat. What about Chung Myung? Joe Gul asked. Sleeping. Dude drank enough to kill a horse. Well, somebody should go wake him up. The Wudang could show up any minute now. And you think he'll wake up if I just ask nicely? Throw some water on him. Fair enough. Wei Lishan quietly closed the window. Father, I have no idea what I'm doing. He felt like his dead father was watching him from the sky, shaking his head. Just then, Yeonpyeong and Wei Sohang entered the room, looking more serious than a tax audit. Father, said Wei Sohang. What is it? The Wudang are probably going to attack us soon. Shouldn't we join the fight? Wei Lishan took a deep breath, unsure of what to do. It was Mount Hua who poked the bear, not Hwayong Gate. If things get too heated, they could just pack their bags and leave town. It might not be glamorous, but hey, at least they wouldn't have to pick up the hospital bills. But if they stayed and fought, well, they'd better be prepared to bleed. What should I do? Wei Lishan thought, wrestling with his indecision. Finally, he turned to his son. What do you think we should do? He asked it like a dad asking where to eat dinner, not expecting much. But his son hit him with some serious wisdom. I think we should fight. And why's that? They're our guests, and we're the hosts. It'd be pretty crappy of us to let our guests do all the heavy lifting while we sit back and eat popcorn. And father, Wei Sohang continued, the reason I've always respected you and been proud of Hwayong Gate is because you were proud of it too. You never regretted standing by Mount Hua, and you didn't do it for rewards. You did it because we belong to Mount Hua. Yes, even if we're just a subsect, we're still part of Mount Hua. How could we sit back and watch while our brothers fight? Wei Lishan looked away, finding it hard to meet his son's eyes. I'm ashamed of myself. While Wei Lishan had been thinking about running, his son was standing tall, holding on to the values his father had taught him. How could he not feel ashamed? Yeonpyeong. Yes, gate leader? Tell the disciples, anyone who wants to fight can stay, and those who want to leave can go. No judgment. Gate leader. If they leave and Hwayong Gate survives today, they're welcome back. No hard feelings. But then no one will stay. No, Wei Lishan smiled, Sohang and I will. That's enough. We'll fight for the name of Mount Hua. Yeonpyeong shook his head with a grin. You two are something else. You're leaving? No, I'm staying too, but I'm fighting for Hwayong Gate, not Mount Hua. Wei Lishan chuckled. Good man. The atmosphere lightened as they exchanged a glance. The weather's nice today, gate leader, Yumpyong added. It is, isn't it? Meanwhile, across the courtyard. Quack! I feel like death, Chung-myung groaned, holding his head. You idiot! Stop drinking so damn much! Baekchon scolded. Shut up! My head's pounding. Did you really need to get hammered right before a fight? I'll sober up in no time. Chung-myung snapped his fingers, and some weird haze floated up from his fingers, instantly purging the alcohol from his system. Baekchon sighed as he stood up. Everyone, listen up! Yes, Sasuk! Up until now, I've let you all mess around without saying much, but today's different. We're fighting with the name of Mount Hua on our backs, so don't screw it up. Yes, sir! Jo Gul, Yoonjong, and Yu Yesil all nodded, their faces serious. Even Chung Myung was smiling, ready for action. Baekchung glanced at Chung Myung. You ready? Gently, right? No. Huh? If you're gonna do it all the way. Don't hold back. Oh, Chung Myung's grin widened. Damn, I like this new Baekchon. As the Wudang disciples made their approach, Baekchon and his group prepared themselves. Swords drawn, eyes narrowed, they were ready for battle. Chung Myung looked toward the entrance. Here they come. Baekchon, finally sensing the approaching energy, ordered, Get ready! And then, as the Wudang disciples leaped over the gate, something insane happened. A blur flew out from behind them. Bang, bang, bang! The Wudang disciples were launched back at twice the speed they'd come in. Baekchon's group stood there dumbfounded, their tension evaporating. Huh? Baekchon looked at Chung Myung, who had his head tilted. Should I have let them come in first? He asked innocently. You brat! Are you planning to do all the work yourself? Baekchon thought. What? The Sajais who had jumped inside flew out? And they were twice as fast to leave as they were when entering? Like, did they just hit a turbo boost or something? Wudang's disciples caught the Sajais that were thrown back. Ack. Ah, did something hit you? Fortunately, it seemed like they weren't seriously wounded. Considering the speed at which they bounced back, they were strangely uninjured. It was like watching a bunch of rubber balls in a circus. What happened? I don't know. I saw something hazy. Jin Hyun's face hardened. They didn't even see the attack? It sounded like utter nonsense. One person could say that. Humans make mistakes. But it was impossible for all three of them to be unable to see what had attacked them. It would only be possible if the attacker's skill level was several times higher than his Saji's. We're only up against the disciples of Mount Hua and Hwayong Gate. Jin Yeon, who had such thoughts, quickly found a reasonable answer. Looks like we stepped into a trap, though I'm not sure how. You mean it wasn't an attack? If it had been a proper attack, would it have ended with such little damage? It wouldn't have been strange if one of them had been cut down. Ah! Right? You're right, Sayong. Jin Hyun bit his lip. Was it really a trap? If not? The exact method was unknown, but what became apparent was that the enemies had someone that could utilize some tricks. It seemed that this was the reason they had requested a battle and not a spar. They're playing tricks. Jin Hyun drew his sword and took 2 steps forward. Follow behind me. I don't know what sort of traps they're using, so I'll lead the charge and break through. Yes! Sahyung. Jin Hyun looked at Hwayong Gate's tightly shut entrance with slightly nervous eyes. What could be behind this? Either way, excessive caution would just play into another trap. Let's go. Without waiting for an answer, Jin Hyun rushed forward and kicked the gate. Kwang. The door shattered and splintered with a crashing roar, scattering shrapnel everywhere like confetti at a bad party. The dust that had risen gradually subsided, and then there was silence. Where's the trap? Jin Hyun had gathered his resolve to break in, but nothing happened. He could only see Mount Hua's disciples standing off in the distance and staring back at him. Geez, why did you break the gate? It wasn't even locked. Ah, kids these days make a mess of everything. Chung Myung clicked his tongue. There were so many reasons that Yoonjong wanted to scold Chung Myung, but now it was time to deal with the enemy. Jin Hyun scanned to the left and then the right before frowning. Is this all? What? When Chung Myung asked, Jin Hyun growled. Do you intend to deal with all of us with only the few of you? That's quite bold. I don't know if that's confidence or arrogance. Chung Myung looked at Yoonjong with a pouty face. What's he talking about? Well, I'm getting a familiar feeling from him. Chung Myung smiled and spoke. Don't you feel like you're looking at the old Baekchon Sasuk? Baekchon, who was suddenly brought into the issue, gnashed his teeth. Don't. Don't. Hey, Baekchon's face flushed red. However, Baekchon himself couldn't deny that Jinhyun's words and actions were similar to his former self. That's what happens to those who don't know that there's another sky above our sky. Baekchon's mind was broken after meeting Chung Myung. No, not just literally or metaphorically. Although his head had been beaten, it really did help him to understand reality. However, no matter how much he'd changed, it was unpleasant to see his shameful past alive and well in front of his eyes. Let's just finish this quickly. Baekchan spoke through a blushing face, and Yoonjong and Jo-gul turned their heads as they struggled to restrain their laughter. A look of bewilderment appeared on Jinhyun as he watched that scene. What is this? They look relaxed? Are there other traps? Yet, no matter how he scanned the area or searched, he couldn't feel any chi. What sort of trap could even be used in this place? And yet, they still greeted him with this attitude? Jinhyun's face began to heat up. These arrogant bastards. Defeating them in a battle of words could help knock them down a peg, but it didn't seem like it could solve the problem. Jinhyun's mouth opened. I don't know where the hell your confidence comes from. Do you believe that Mount Hua, which has never defeated Wudang in the past, can fight back now? Chung Myung laughed. Who was never defeated? 100 years ago, we were much stronger than you, although it was never officially recognized. Huh? 100 years ago? Jinhyun smiled and laughed. Yeah, right. 100 years ago. The era of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint that you're so proud of. Huh? Chung Myung was a bit shocked. It felt strange to hear the name Plum Blossom Sword Saint coming from this guy's mouth. That name couldn't even be heard in Mount Hua, but now it was coming from a disciple of Wudang? Did you know that the Plum Blossom Sword Saint you're so proud of was defeated by the Wudang's Taiji Sword Emperor? What? Baekchon was enraged. What nonsense are you saying? Ha ha, nonsense, you say. The two of them once had a spar. To protect the honor of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, our ancestor hid the result. Mount Hua has never been a match for the Wudang sect. It would help you to understand that. As Jin Hyun continued his taunting, the faces of Mount Hua's disciples flushed red in anger. It was fine to ignore and look down on them, but disrespecting their ancestors was unforgivable. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint is the pride of Mount Hua. How dare you speak such drivel about our ancestors? You're crossing the line. He's not someone your foul mouth can speak of. I cannot forgive you. An unknown sadness encroached upon Chung Myung's heart when he saw his fellow disciples react like this. They're protecting me so much. Me. Hey, you kids, I'm the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Oh my, damn it. I can't even tell them the truth. How tragic. But apart from those emotions, Chung Myung didn't feel particularly angry at Jin Hyun's words. He just thought it was a bit absurd. Wow, this is such a distortion of history. That Taoist bastard demanded a spar with such a determined expression that it seemed like he wouldn't give up even if he died. It's a bit annoying to call it a secret spar. I was just too lazy to fight that weak idiot. And what? Your wickedness has gone too far. As a fellow member of a Taoist sect, I will show you the true path of a Taoist. Please do not blame my sword for being merciless. I ask that you reflect on what you have done. That. I admit that your power surpasses mine. Knowing that I am lacking, I want to back down. No, I am not trying to walk away. No, wait! Stop hitting me! You've already won! How can a Taoist act like this? Ack! No, I'm not saying that! Ack! Hung! Spare me! He was such a good little brother. Although he was older, he referred to Chung Myung respectfully as Hung. Huh? Nothing. Chung Myung waved his hand. After that, whenever Chung Myung stopped by Wudang, he would call out to the Taiji Sword Emperor and have a nice time. They would visit a popular neighborhood where there were a lot of expensive stores. Chung Myung had the pleasure of renting the top floor of the most expensive restaurants and drinking the most expensive alcohol, while the Wudang sect was left to pay the bills. Whenever Chung Myung thought of the Taiji Sword Emperor's distressed expression, he felt a little bad before laughing. No, now wasn't the time to reminisce. Wow, the story changed this much. No one knows the truth, and there is no proof either. At that time, Jin Hyun, who misunderstood Chung Myung's reaction, scoffed at him. Even Mount Hua's most powerful swordsman couldn't withstand the power of Wudang. Don't you think you're too arrogant to try and deal with us now? Your pride in front of Wudang. Hey, shut up and come fight! Come on! Chung Myung sighed heavily. You see, it doesn't matter who won 100 years ago. Can men from 100 years ago come and support or cheer for you now? They're all dead, you bastard. If you like those old men so much, just go join the Wudang. Ah, you already are a bastard of Wudang. He already is one. How dare you? Anyway, you old-fashioned people. Even though his past had been distorted, Chung Myung didn't feel angry. What does it matter now? I got defeated by the heavenly demon anyway. The present is what matters most. And that's what those in power do. The Wudang sect would never have dared to say such a thing if Mount Hua was stronger than them. In other words, if the current Mount Hua was overwhelmingly more powerful than the Wudang sect, then even if they claimed that the Plum Blossom Sword Saint was stronger than the Taiji Sword Emperor, there would be no backlash. Control belongs to those who grasp power, whether it's history, money, or the right to speak. This was something that Chung Myung had no complaints about. I'm strong. It'll all be mine. This problem could be resolved as long as Mount Hua could take down the Wudang sect. Well, it didn't really matter if the distorted history was corrected anyway. The current Chung Myung needed to receive a higher evaluation than the past Plum Blossom Sword Saint. You really need to see blood to get your mind stray. Young trainee Wei! Wei! Jin Hyun tried to speak but was interrupted when Chung Myung called for Wei So-hang. Wei So-hang, who was watching from behind, was utterly puzzled. Yes? Did you do everything I asked you to? About the rumors? Yes, I spread word to the people in Nanyang. Good, now then. Ugh! Chung Myung drew his sword. The disciples of Wudang flinched as they stepped back. All of a sudden, as Chung Myung swung his sword, qi gushed out from the tip. However, the sword slash wasn't directed at the Wudang disciples. Rather, it headed toward the walls of Hwayoung Gate before slicing them open several times. Crack! In an instant, the walls collapsed. What are you doing? Wei Lishan's eyes widened. No, why would that son of a bitch tear down the walls of their own subsect? Ah, but Wei Lishan soon understood Chung Myung's intent and went silent. Around the wall, a stampede of people from Nanyang was rushing to view what was happening. Having heard that Wudang and Mount Hua would fight at Hwayoung Gate, an audience came to watch. Who wouldn't want to witness this battle? I kind of like growing my name. Chung Myung chuckled. Their purpose here wasn't just to help Hwayoung Gate. They needed people to see that Mount Hua could beat down the Wudang sect. Every small victory they achieved would help raise Mount Hua's reputation in the future. It's quite embarrassing. Hearing Baekchun's words, Chung Myung smiled. If you are going to do it perfectly. Right. Then there's only one thing left to do. Chung Myung looked at the Wudang disciples. Sahyung, how many are possible for you? 2. I think it's 3 for me. All right, that's 5. Chung Myung stroked his chin. You Sago should take care of 4. Baekchun Sasuk, you can handle him. And you? Do I have to? Forget it. There are people around, so restrain yourself, please. Then let's go. Sasuk, Sago, Sahyung. Ah, Ak, Phew. Mount Hua's disciples each sighed in various ways as they trudged forward. Someone needs to fall today. A cold chill flickered in Baekchun's eyes. If they're the disciples of the Wudang sect, they'll be more than enough to show the results of your training. Let's go, guys. Show those bastards the sword of Mount Hua. Yes, Sasuk. Yes, Sahyung. Behind them, they heard a quiet voice respond. Why do you all react so differently, even though I said the same thing? You should just shut your mouth, brat. Seems like there's a fight. Oh my, Mount Hua and the Wudang sect. All those who saw the situation happening gulped in anticipation, like they were about to witness a reality show featuring the worst family reunion ever. This is bad. Maybe we should back off. Where else can we see a spectacle like this? This is amazing. This is something we could never see in Nanyang. Even if I die, I need to watch this. That's true. But concerns and expectations overlapped, but no one stepped back. It was a massive event that they would like to see at least once in their lives. It was especially true in places like Nanyang, where nothing major happens. Most of the audience believed that Wudang played the central role in this event, but many also supported Mount Hua. Perhaps elsewhere, most people would have never heard of Mount Hua. But this was Nanyang. Huayong Gate had endured in this land for 100 years already. Huayong Gate had become inseparable from Nanyang, and their lives both breathed in unison. The people of Nanyang tend to have a favorable feeling for Mount Hua because this subsect proudly professed their relationship. This was the reason that martial arts sects tried to establish subsects throughout the world. There are limits to what the main sects, like Wudang and Mount Hua, could accomplish independently. But if their disciples spread out and form subsects, gates, and training halls, their influence is bound to spread. Can Mount Hua win? Hey, they're up against Wudang. Why not? I heard that last time Mount Hua shamed the Southern Edge sect. Are the Southern Edge sect and Wudang the same? Wudang is Wudang! Shh, quiet! Hearing the voices murmuring around, Joe Gould took a low breath. In front of his eyes, dressed in black robes, were the disciples of Wudang. Can I do it? If Joe Gould was the same as before, then he wouldn't be sure. It had been a long time since he first entered Mount Hua and began learning martial arts, but he never thought of himself as a martial artist. But now, it is a more severe problem if I can't win. One thing was certain. Everyone that calls themselves a swordsman has strived to improve their skills over the past 2 years. However, none of them have trained as viciously as the second and third class disciples of Mount Hua. It's terrifying. Behind him stood the Asura. The most terrible thing about Chung Myung was the various forms he would take. At some times, he is an Asura. Then, in the next moment, he talks about the sword as if he is some accomplished saint. At other times, he is a wise man that has knowledge of the world, and then he is a fool the next moment. Chung Myung shifted between each of these forms to train Mount Hua's disciples. Brr! When Joe Gould thought of the past 2 years, his body trembled. Joe Gould thought that if he could become strong, he would be able to withstand any kind of training. However, a short 2 months after the Southern Edge Conference, his determination had been completely blown away. It wasn't easy to tear down and rebuild everything that had been established. Chung Myung pressed him so hard that he would foam at the mouth and collapse in exhaustion after training. All those trials and tribulations were driven into Joe Gould's body and sword and piled up. He looked up at Wudang's swordsman. Be confident. In the past, he thought that confidence came from believing in oneself. But now he understood. If there were no skills to back your beliefs, then it was baseless bravado. Confidence is developed over time. If you believe in what you have done and your own efforts, you cannot help but overflow with confidence. One-on-one? Joe Gould's lips twisted. This is for the pride of our sect. 4 people stepped forward from both sides. Obviously, since they're a small group, they would have preferred to stick together. But the plan was already settled. Was there any rule that required them to compete fairly? If not, it doesn't matter. It's okay to ignore them. It's okay if people laugh. Now Joe Gould knew that it didn't mean a thing. At the end of the day, skills are all that matter. Grr. The Wudang swordsman standing in front of Joe Gould drew his sword and pointed it at him. As he watched his opponent, Joe Gould smiled. Seeing Joe Gould struggle to contain his laughter, the swordsman from Wudang frowned. Are you laughing at me? Ah, I am sorry. That's not it. Joe Gould, still unable to calm his laughter, spoke through a smile on his face. Isn't it simple? I'm just so proud of my growth that I can't help but laugh. It has nothing to do with you. You're crazy. Maybe. Joe Gould's body shook, and the strength he used to hold his sword increased. This is what it looks like. He could tell. The man in front of him was no match for Joe Gould. His posture with the sword, the way he stood, his overall balance, and the chi flowing from his body. There were so many issues that Joe Gould was itching to point out to his opponent. If Joe Gould felt this irritated when looking at his opponent's form, then how must Chung Myung feel when he sees them? This must be why he doesn't stop nagging. Wudang's Jin Gong. Mount Hua's Joe Gould. This was no spar. Any further conversation would only get in the way. Joe Gould took his position. Maybe it was because of his pride, but Jin Gong wouldn't be the first to attack. Then, Joe Gould would need to go to him. Strength gathered at the tip of his toes. Joe Gould let the force pull him forward and simply ran ahead. His sword trembled as it unleashed various techniques. Fast, slow, elegant, and violent. Numerous swords melded into one, and it was impossible to know which was real and which was fake. Ever-changing and welcoming. The splendid blade that was the basis of Mount Hua's swordsmanship emerged from the tip of Zhou Gul's sword. Ah! Wudong's disciple retreated in a moment of panic. That's the wrong answer. When one steps back, the changing sword deepens. Perhaps this opponent had never dealt with such a technique. Jin Gong tightly bit his lip and finally began to unfold his sword. Soft lines with smooth and elegant movement. The sword of Wudong. This was the first time Zhou Gul was directly experiencing Wudong's sword. But Zhou Gul didn't panic at all and continued to press the opponent in front of him. What a monster. There is nothing wrong with saying that you have to go a lot of real-life experiences. Though, that doesn't mean you need to be nervous or improvise everything. It just means that you need to build up experience to learn how to react. Even if it's the same sword art, it's bound to be divided into different types depending on the swordsman that uses it. The sword of Mount Hua is splendid, the sword of the Southern Edge sect is serious, and the sword of Wudong is soft. So, you mean I need to build up real-world experience? No. Sahyung doesn't have to do that. Since I'm here, you'll just get used to it when you get hit by a variety of swords. So today, let's start with being gently beaten by the sword of Wudang. Why do I have to be beaten? Zhou Gul's last question was never answered, but his body has already suffered through the sword of Wudang. Then, compared to the softness of Chung Myung's sword, the opponent's sword didn't seem soft. The sword of Wudang that Chung Myung showed was several times more perfect than his opponent's. So, Zhou Gul wasn't the least bit flustered when dealing with that incomplete technique. The speed of Zhou Gul's sword increased, faster, more splendid. The Wudang sect's technique was counter-focused. They would wait for the opponent to make the first move before seizing their chance for victory. It was a method to subdue the opponent by receiving their sword without rushing. The Wudang sect ascended to the highest echelons of the martial world with this technique. So how does one deal with that? What is there to think about? If someone can block a fast attack, that means you need to shove the attack in faster. Everything in this world is relative. Water may put out a fire, but it evaporates when put in front of an even bigger fire. Pang! Zhou Gul's sword ripped through the air. The sword penetrated so quickly that it didn't even give the opponent a chance to swing his sword. Slow. It's too slow. Not to mention Chung Myung. Even his Sahyung sword was twice as fast, and his Sasuk swords were even faster than that. Was it because of the different natures of their swords? The nature of their techniques may be different, but the basics cannot be hidden. Unknowingly, Zhou Gul smiled. I'm strong. This disciple from the Wudang sect seemed powerless in front of Zhou Gul, whether it be his body or his sword. The years of training with Chung Myung had added up. The Wudang disciple couldn't handle what was happening, and seeing his embarrassed face, Zhou Gul swung his sword again. Jinhua, who was facing Yunzhong, was equally flustered. This cannot be. Jinhua's face crumbled. I am falling behind a bastard of Mount Hua. It was not enough to say that it was only Mount Hua. From what Jinhua knew, the disciple he was currently facing was from a younger generation than him. He is a second-class disciple, and this guy called Yunzhong is supposed to only be a third-class disciple. But Jinhua had already suffered several slashes from Yunzhong's sword. Ack! An unbearable rage boiled over and let loose from his mouth. This cannot be, and that anger extended onto his sword. A slight gap emerged in Jinhua's technique, which had been stable until now. Yunzhong didn't miss this chance. Swish! Yunzhong's sword stabbed forward and targeted the slight gap between his opponent's technique. Akang. Wudang's sword relies on gently countering the opponent's sword. In other words, if they fail to receive their enemy's strike, they are unable to start anything. Yunzhong's sword disturbed the opponent's balance and fell on him again, aiming for Jinhua's body. A very elegant and flashy sword. Ache! Desperately, Jinhua swung his sword, yet he couldn't prevent the cuts that accumulated across his body. In the meantime, Jinhua saw the technique evolve. Dozens of spectacular swords swung at him swiftly and gracefully. Then, Yunzhong's eyes looked cold. How? The sword was incredibly sharp and fierce, but Yunzhong had a terrifying level of composure and response while displaying his technique. I am a disciple of Wudang. Jinhua shouted in a convulsive manner and threw himself at Yunzhong. He was determined to cut his flesh, even if he had to sacrifice his own bones. However, Yunjong simply took a step back. Exactly one step. His fluttering sword came down. Like a plum blossom falling to the floor, his sword sliced down and sank into Jinhua's shoulder. Chak! The shoulder split and blood came spilling out. Shh! Jinhua's sword fell to the floor, and his face was filled with shock. You? Yunjong spoke to Jinhua, who failed to understand the situation. Your Taoist sword isn't bad. However, the time you and I spent improving is far too different. Go. Holding his bleeding shoulder, Jinhua staggered back in retreat. Yunjong just shrugged as he saw that. I've become so strong. His gaze turned back unconsciously. Yunjong looked at Chung Myung, who was watching him from the back, and when they made eye contact, Yunjong quickly turned his head around again. Seeing Chung Myung's dissatisfied expression, Yunjong felt like he was in for another round of nagging later. But it didn't feel bad. Yunjong quietly mumbled, "The sword of Mount Hua is strong." It was now time for the rest of the world to understand that, not just them. Huh. Wei Lishan's eyes widened as if they would pop out. He looked like a cartoon character seeing their crush for the first time. No. That what? Obviously, he had seen it with his own two eyes from start to finish. However, his head couldn't properly interpret the situation he had witnessed. Are we winning? No. To be precise, it was overwhelming. Mount Hua's disciples were pushing back the disciples of Wudang, who seemed so terrifying at the start. If they were a horror movie, they'd be the first act getting slaughtered. Wei Lishan couldn't believe his eyes. Where are the Wudang? They resided at the northern tip of Kangho. There were many sects in the world, but few would hesitate to place Wudang at the peak. They were like the top tier of martial arts, the LeBron James of sects. However, the disciples of the Wudang sect were currently struggling against the disciples of Mount Hua. It was like watching a lion lose to a bunch of angry kittens. This can't be happening. Huayong Gate is a subsect of Mount Hua. Wei Lishan is a man infinitely proud to be a disciple of Mount Hua. But pride is pride, and reality is reality, right? Just because someone is proud of their father doesn't mean that they fail to recognize that a general or king has a higher status. Like saying your dad is cooler than Thor. Goodwill and ability are two separate issues. Wei Lishan's feelings for Mount Hua were the same. He knew that he was from a fallen sect, but he couldn't sever the affection he held for Mount Hua. Now that fallen sect was protecting him, and it even seemed to be winning. What a plot twist. Wei Lishan grabbed his chest. He felt something throbbing, and it wasn't just his heart racing from the excitement. Father? Yes. Wei Soheng also looked back at Wei Lishan with trembling eyes, the kind of eyes that screamed, "What the heck is going on?" They're strong. What more could be said? There was an endless sense of excitement. Gulp, gulp. Wei Lishan slowly turned his head. Sitting on the floor with a shaggy head of hair, Chung Myung was drowning himself in a bottle of alcohol that he seemed to mysteriously manifest from who knows where. Talk about a magic trick gone wrong. Kua! Feeling Wei Lishan's gaze fall on him, Chung Myung tilted his head and asked, "Would you like a drink?" Mount Hua has changed. The disciples became stronger than ever. And has some crazy ones too. Back in the day, neither were there. Wei Lishan had no choice but to wonder which was better. Having both or having neither. No, now isn't the time to think about this. Disciple, your Sayungs and Sasuks are fighting. How are you drinking? Yes, slowly. Right. Then what are you doing? No. Chung Myung smiled as he saw Wei Lishan grimace in bewilderment. I've already done my part, but if they lose to those kids, we'll have to dip our noses in the water. What? Wei Lishan asked back with a face that showed he couldn't understand at all. The confusion was real. Instead of answering, Chung Myung just smiled and laughed. Then he looked over where the battle was happening. Who taught them? They can't help but turn out strong. After all, Chung Myung had taught them directly. Was it arrogance? Well, others are welcome to think that. Even if you search the world, there would be few that could teach these kids like Chung Myung has. It's something that even Chung Myung himself acknowledges. No one else could ever teach their disciples like Chung Myung. Never. It would be unimaginable to think of the strongest members of a sect kicking and abusing the second and third class disciples and teaching them starting from the basics. No matter where one looked in the world, such a place did not exist. Even if there were people that had the will to do it, if they actually tried, all the elders and the sect leader would come running and cause a fuss until it stopped. Of course, that is only natural. The strength of a sect is determined by how many masters it can produce, but the status of a sect is determined by how highly its strongest master could rank compared to others. Wasn't it clear from the way Mount Hua was always considered beneath Wudang? Yet they laughed in their faces when the Plum Blossom Sword Saint was around? To create such masters, the top warriors of each faction devoted all their efforts to cultivation, and one person was selected to perfect the sect's martial arts. To prevent the difference in disciples, some immediate disciples were also trained. But Chung Myung is different. He had an understanding of martial arts that went beyond the top leaders of each sect, and furthermore, he had knowledge and experience they lacked. Above all else, it's important for me to be strong, but that isn't all. Hadn't he already felt it? In a life where he alone struggled to be strong, Chung Myung was pained by the results that he failed to reach. The image of his Sahyungs, who died right before his eyes, still haunts his dreams to this day. He never wanted to see something like that happen again. Mount Hua had to become stronger now, so that someday, when Chung Myung fully realizes his martial arts and his Sahyungs become strong enough to support him, they can usher in a new era for Mount Hua, unlike any other before it. Gulp, gulp, kwa. Chung Myung, who continued to drink his liquor, wiped his mouth with his sleeve and mumbled, Jo Gul Sahyung made 3 mistakes. No, 4. He would need to be handled later. Baekchon slowly turned his head and looked at Jo Gul. He clearly heard Chung Myung mumbling from behind. There was no way that Jo Gul didn't hear it either. Baekchon could see Jo Gul's face go pale as he continued to wield his sword. I shouldn't make a mistake. Baekchon turned his gaze towards Jin Hyun, who was staring at him with a determined face. Baekchon slowly opened his mouth. What are you doing? What? You don't seem like the sort of person that would just sit and stare. Jin Hyun, understanding Baekchon's words, bit his lip and quietly spoke. Help the Sahyungs. Sahyung? What are you doing? Move right now. Yes, the disciples guarding Jin Hyun's back all scattered to support their Sahyungs, who were being overwhelmed. Baekchon glanced at Jin Hyun and smiled. It's a scene that people will remember. Wudang's disciples desperately tried to collaborate with one another to handle Mount Hua's disciples. Jin Hyun couldn't say anything and smacked his lips. Damn it! Even if they won, there would be no pride in it. No, it was shameful instead. If it wasn't for this fight being gravely important, Jin Hyun wouldn't have ordered such a thing, even if it meant losing. Isn't this fun? Jin Hyun sighed deeply and opened his eyes slightly. Seeing the anger and embarrassment disappearing from his face, Baekchon nodded. That's great. In terms of level-headedness, this man exceeded Baekchon. Baekchon still wasn't an expert in controlling his emotions, but that was all. Then Jin Hyun spoke. Can I ask one thing? Sure. By what means did you become so strong? That isn't the fun question I was hoping for. The reason is rather simple. We trained hard. Are you messing with me? Baekchon shrugged his shoulders. Even though he was telling the truth, no one believed him. So what was the point? Of course, their training was excessive to the point that they would vomit, cough blood, and collapse from exhaustion. They were seriously worried they might die. You could never make it through that training. It wasn't something that could be done with willpower alone. It was only possible because there was someone that could push them to the edge and was strong enough to bully them to the point that they felt it was better to die than rebel. When he thought back to his training, a chill ran down Baekchon's body, and he began to tremble unconsciously. Whatever. Either way, it's true that you people are strong. But there is one more thing. Jin Hyun's face was slightly distorted. It was as if the emotions he tried to hold back were slightly breaking through. Why isn't that guy coming forward? Is he ignoring the Wudang sect? Or is he simply trying to safeguard that reputation of his? That one. Baekchon glanced at Chung Myung and smirked. You seem to be mistaken. Mistaken? He won't take the stage for someone at your level. We raise our swords against those that match our skills. Jin Hyun's face was distorted. But don't get too angry. It's the same for me. Strange things happen in the world, like a 3-legged hen or a snake with 2 tails. Sometimes a monster with 3 heads and 6 arms comes out as well. 3 heads and 6 arms? Don't worry, I'll play with you. Wouldn't it be appropriate for the righteous sword of Hua to deal with the Wudang's indestructible sword? Aren't you his Sasek? It's impossible to gauge strength simply by rank. At one time, Baekchun was obsessed with such things, but now Baekchun's goal is just to grow stronger. We should start the fight soon, or that damn bastard will get furious again. But before that, I would like to make a promise. Baekchun looked at Jin Hyun and said, if you lose this fight, step away from Nanyang and never touch Hwayong Gate again. That is, if you are someone who knows shame. Jin Hyun's face hardened. If we lose, I promise on my honor. Okay then. Sung. Baekchun drew his sword as Jin Hyun also slowly pulled out his blade. After a short few words of conversation, there was no longer a need to talk. From now on, their swords would speak for them. Ta! Jin Hyun rushed at Baekchun with no hesitation. I must not give him a break. He wasn't going to play around after watching his Sayoung's battles. Mount Hua's sword was elegant and swift. If he gave them time, he might be attacked and overwhelmed without even having a chance to counter. But despite seeing Jin Hyun rush in, Baekchun didn't seem to be the least bit agitated. I'm reminded again. What a monster we've been training with. Your head must be empty. Sasek lost 12 times today. Do you have a death wish? Are you going to keep doing this again and again until you die? Right. Until the day is done, we'll keep going. Kuak. Baekchun gnashed his teeth and clenched his sword as he recalled nightmarish memories that he wished he could forget. He ran toward Jin Hyun, who was also rushing at him. Sword Dragon? One of the brightest geniuses in the world? If the Southern Edge Conference hadn't happened, then perhaps Jingum Ryong would have been one of the 6 dragons. In other words, Jin Hyun and Jingum Ryong were equally talented. Baekchun's eyes turned cold. Jin Hyun's sword, deeply coated with a blue sword chi, smoothly swam through the air. It was a sight as if blue silk was slicing the sky. What strength! An unwavering sword. It was a sword that truly deserved to be praised. And Baekchun slightly shook his sword. Pop! A red plum blossom bloomed from the tip of his sword. I made it bloom. After driving themselves to the limit, destroying and rebuilding their bodies many times over, the results were shown. Plum blossoms had finally bloomed at the tip of Baekchun's sword. The plum blossom that slowly bloomed quickly multiplied and became dozens and then hundreds. As if a gale had begun to blow, plum blossoms rose into the air as a rain of petals fluttered about. Ah! Jin Hyun's eyes shook and went wide as saucers. He swung his sword desperately, albeit belatedly. A wave of deep blue sword chi covered his entire body. It was a mighty and unbreakable sword chi, but it was impossible to keep fluttering petals from working their way inside. Shh! The petals dug in between the gaps in Jin Hyun's sword chi and sliced his side. Kua! At that moment, the blossoms began to fly in unison toward Jin Hyun as his sword chi was disturbed. Ah! The petals swept across Jin Hyun's body. Thud! Baekchun looked at Jin Hyun, who had fallen to the floor, and quietly pushed his sword into the sheath. Maybe the name Sword Dragon was given to you a bit too early. A merciless declaration. And after that, a subtle voice followed after. Wow! Look at that cool guy! Don't do that, you damned little bastard!